Medieval monastery gardens fed Europe for 800 years using a system that modern agriculture deliberately buried. Monks planted crops once and harvested for decades. One planting, 20 years of food, sometimes more. These weren't myths, they were documented practices recorded in texts like Charlemagne's Capitule de Villis from 800 AD. Then, in 50 years, this knowledge vanished, not because the plants stopped working, but because they made farmers too independent. Today, 95% of vegetables require annual replanting. You plant, harvest, and buy seeds again every single year. But medieval farmers planted asparagus once and fed communities for 25 years. They planted good King Henry by their doors and harvested greens for decades. The knowledge was never lost, it was buried. Because perennial vegetables don't create dependency, they create freedom. Welcome to Golden Vault Garden. Today we're uncovering 7 forgotten crops that fed medieval Europe and why modern agriculture doesn't want you growing them. Asparagus. The Romans cultivated asparagus as early as 200 BC. Emperor Augustus described urgent tasks as being quicker than you can cook asparagus. When Rome fell, asparagus nearly disappeared. Medieval monks preserved it through the Dark Ages. By 1469, asparagus beds were standard in French monasteries. Here's how it worked and why it's genius. You plant crowns in year 1, deep beds, rich soil. You harvest nothing for 2 full years. The crowns need that time to establish root systems 10 feet deep, roots that will support decades of production. Year 3, you start cutting spears for 6 to 8 weeks each spring when they emerge 6 to 8 inches tall. Then you stop and let the remaining spears grow into feathery fronds that photosynthesize and store energy for next year. Those same crowns produce for 15 years, often 20, sometimes 25 years or more. A 40-foot row yields 10 to 25 pounds per season for 25 years from one planting. That's 250 to 625 pounds of asparagus from a single planting event. To match that with annual vegetables, you'd replant tomatoes 25 times. Medieval asparagus had what modern varieties lost: flavor, intensity, and nutrient density. Deep roots pulling minerals from 10 feet underground, slow growth producing denser, more flavorful spears. Modern asparagus is bred for uniformity and shipping durability. Medieval asparagus was bred to nourish communities. Industrial farming killed asparagus cultivation for one reason: 3 years without income is unacceptable. Annual crops produce year 1. You sell seeds annually, charge for fertilizers annually, create dependency annually. Asparagus creates independence. Plant once, harvest 25 years. That's 25 years you're not buying seeds. Good King Henry. This plant has a name from fairy tales and history to match. Some say it's named after a German king. Others claim Good Henry was a Saxon elf, distinguished from Bad Henry, a poisonous plant nearby. What we know is this: Good King Henry fed medieval peasants from the 12th to 16th centuries as a staple, not a specialty. Medieval families planted it by their back doors, not in distant garden plots, right by the door for immediate access. One planting meant greens from early spring through late summer, year after year. 0 replanting. Here's the genius: 3 harvests from one plant. Spring brings thick young shoots cut underground like asparagus. That's harvest 1. Then the plant grows and harvest 2 begins, triangular dark green leaves picked throughout spring and summer, used like spinach. Later in summer, harvest 3 arrives, flowering shoots producing small green buds cooked like broccoli. 3 crops from 1 perennial. According to botanical research, 30 plants produce enough for 4 people. That's 7.5 plants per person for lifetime greens. Compare that to spinach, requiring replanting every few weeks, buying new seeds constantly. But nutrition shows the real difference. Good King Henry has higher iron than modern spinach, higher calcium, higher vitamin C, higher protein. Perennial roots dig 3 to 5 feet deep, pulling minerals that annual spinach roots at 18 inches can't reach. So, why did it disappear? Spinach became fashionable in the 17th century. Annual spinach was easier for seed companies to sell yearly. Good King Henry made farmers too self-sufficient. By the 20th century, it nearly vanished. Medieval peasants planted it by their doors and never worried about greens again. Modern gardeners buy spinach seeds every spring. Skirret. In 1682, John Whirlidge wrote, "The sweetest, whitest, most pleasant of roots." He wasn't exaggerating. This perennial root was so prized that King Henry VIII of England maintained dedicated gardens exclusively for growing it. Roman Emperor Tiberius loved it so much he demanded it as tribute from Germany. Before sugar from cane and beets became available, Skirret was a major sweetness source. Medieval honey was expensive. Sugar was exotic and rare. But Skirret? Plant once, renewable sweetness source. The roots taste like parsnip crossed with carrot, with vanilla hints, naturally sweet without processing. Medieval cultivation worked like this. Plant Skirret year 1 from seed or root divisions. First year roots are small but edible. Year 2, roots become sweet, thick, and productive. The plant forms pencil-thin white root clusters, each 6 to 8 inches long. Then it produces indefinitely. Every year you harvest roots while leaving enough to regrow. Nutritionally, Skirret beats potatoes in nearly every way. Higher vitamins, better minerals, lower glycemic index, and critically, it's perennial. Potatoes die yearly and must be replanted. So why did Skirret vanish by the late 1700s? Potatoes arrived from the Americas. Easier to prepare, just peel and boil. Higher yields per square foot, novel and fashionable. Most importantly for seed sellers, potatoes are annual. You replant yearly using seed potatoes saved or bought fresh. Lovage. Imagine a plant growing 6 feet tall, producing massive amounts of intensely flavored leaves every year, living 20 years or more. That's lovage. Medieval monasteries cultivated it for one reason: versatility. Every part is useful. The leaves, tasting like celery with 10 times the intensity, were used fresh or dried to season soups, stocks, and stews. One sprig flavored an entire pot of soup for 50 monks. That's how potent it is. The thick, hollow stems were harvested young and candied as sweet treats. The seeds were ground to flavor bread and cheese. The thick, fleshy roots were boiled and eaten as vegetables. One plant, 4 different foods, all from a perennial producing 20 years. A mature lovage plant grows 6 feet tall, spreads 3 feet wide, and produces enormous leaf quantities annually. Medieval cooks used one sprig to flavor entire pots. To match one Lovage plant's 20-year production, you'd buy celery weekly for 20 years. At $2 per bunch, that's over $2,000 in celery over 2 decades. Or spend $8 once for Lovage roots. Plant them, harvest 20 years. Rhubarb. Here's a real gardener account. My folks had a rhubarb plant on the old home place that my grandma planted. Must be 50 years old, still producing. That's not exaggeration, that's rhubarb. Medieval Europeans discovered something by the 16th century. The tart stalks are edible. Not the leaves, those contain toxic oxalic acid, but the thick red or green stalks emerging in spring. The genius of rhubarb is indestructibility. Plant a crown in rich soil with full sun. Don't harvest year 1, let it establish roots. Year 2, take a light harvest. By year 3, the plant is mature and you can harvest heavily. Then it produces 5 to 10 pounds of edible stalks per season for decades. In ideal conditions, 50 years or more from a single planting. Rhubarb tolerates extreme cold. It actually requires cold winters to thrive. The plant dies back completely in winter, then in spring, thick shoots emerge and rapidly grow into massive stalks. It's practically indestructible once established. Drought, rhubarb survives. Neglect, rhubarb thrives. Pests and diseases, rarely a problem. Why did rhubarb survive when so many perennials disappeared? Because it has a unique flavor profile that can't be easily replaced. Too distinctive to eliminate. But what modern gardeners don't realize, medieval rhubarb cultivation was part of a larger system. Monasteries planted rhubarb alongside asparagus, good King Henry, Lovage, and Skirret. They designed gardens for multi-generational production. Modern gardeners plant rhubarb, then surround it with annuals dying every year. They don't see the pattern. Medieval monks did. Crop number 6. Artichokes. By the 12th century, artichokes were documented in monastery gardens across southern Europe. Hildegard von Bingen, the famous German abbess and herbalist, recorded artichoke cultivation for both food and medicine. Here's the perennial magic. You plant crowns in year 1. Don't harvest anything. The plant establishes, growing large silvery green leaves and developing strong roots. Year 2, the plant matures and begins producing edible flower buds, what we call artichokes. Each plant produces up to 12 large buds per summer. Years 2 through 8, the plant keeps producing. Every summer, 12 edible buds per plant. After year 8, quality declines. This is when most gardeners give up and replant. But medieval farmers knew better. When the original plant declines, you dig it up and split it into 3 to 5 new plants. Those divisions, called offsets, grow from roots around the main clump. You separate them and plant as new artichoke plants. Those divisions reset the clock. They'll produce another 4 to 8 years before needing division again. Effectively, infinite production from one initial planting through continuous propagation. Medieval monasteries maintained artichoke patches for generations using this method. One original planting could be divided and subdivided indefinitely. Horseradish. The National Allotment Society warns gardeners about horseradish with 5 words: hard to remove once in. That's not a joke, that's a warning. Horseradish is so perennial, so persistent, so impossible to kill that medieval gardeners planted it in monastery corners where nothing else would grow. Poor soil? Plant horseradish, it thrives. Shade? Horseradish doesn't care. Drought, it survives. Neglect, it spreads. You plant a horseradish root cutting once, just once, a root piece 6 inches long at a 45-degree angle. Then it grows forever. Every year you can harvest thick, pungent roots and grate them fresh for intense condiment that clears sinuses and wakes up taste buds. Medieval herbalists used horseradish for both food and medicine, respiratory ailments, digestive aid, poultices for joint pain. One established plant spreads aggressively. The roots grow deep and wide, sending up new shoots in widening circles. Every root piece left in soil can grow a new plant. The challenge isn't getting horseradish to produce, it's containing it. Medieval gardeners used this aggressiveness strategically. They planted it in garden corners, in poor soil along walls, in areas where cultivated vegetables struggled. Why did horseradish survive when so many perennials disappeared? Because you literally can't kill it easily. Even industrial agriculture gave up trying to eliminate it. Plow it under, it grows back. Spray herbicides, some roots survive. Pull it up, soil fragments regenerate. Medieval monks planted it once and harvested as long as the monastery existed. That's the power of perennials. Once established, they don't need you. They just keep producing. The vegetables that sustained medieval Europe through 800 years are still here. Asparagus, Good King Henry, Skirret, Lovage, Rhubarb, Artichoke, Horseradish. 7 crops, 1 planting, decades of harvests. Medieval monks planted these and fed communities for generations. Modern agriculture plants annuals and creates dependency on corporations. The choice isn't between medieval and modern, it's between dependency and sovereignty. Every asparagus crown is a 25-year declaration of independence. Every Good King Henry plant by your door is freedom from buying spinach forever. Every lovage in your garden is 20 years of self-sufficient seasoning. Medieval farmers made their choice. They chose freedom. What will you choose? Subscribe to Golden Vault Garden and let's keep digging up what they buried. Comment below, which perennial are you planting first? The knowledge was here all along. Let's bring it back.